I'm here to celebrate the life of my best mate, Glyn MacArthur. I think it's appropriate that I start with the loves in his life. Glyn and Jean loved and cared for each other for almost 50 years. She has been his steadying hand, especially through the 2 cancers of motor neurone disease that they endured together, supporting each other. He loved his dad, who we lost many years ago, and from whom he inherited many of his endearing traits. People were his third love, and especially his close friends, and I'm proud to have been one of those for over 60 years. He loved animals and was an avid identifier of all the wildlife that he so loved in Australia. If I were to tell you all the stories of our life together, we would need to be here for a week, so I need to try to give you a picture by using the timeline of his life. Glyn was born to Margaret and Ivor Arthur on May the 19th, 1946, just a month before I was born. Glyn had a brother, Bryn, who was a year older. His early life was spent living in a big old house opposite the park in Seedley, a district of his beloved Salford. I didn't know him then, but his mum always told the story of his dislike of clothes. She would dress him up for school in the morning, and he would arrive home naked in the afternoon, having thrown his clothes into the trees in the park. Shyness was not one of Glyn's strong points, as we all know. He moved to live close by me in Hayfield Road, in the posh part of Salford, and I met him at Lancaster Road School, which was later named Lighthorpe School. I think Bryn was having problems, so his mum sent them both to a private school, Eccles High, where he met many new friends who were still in contact through Facebook and Friends Reunited. Glyn and I became special friends at 10 years when my mother died and I became an honorary member of the Arthur household. His mum and dad fed me the most beautiful sweets and puddings. I would have mine at home first and then go around there for seconds. As teenagers, we would be the scourge of the neighbourhood, racing around on our bikes to the parks and over the sandhills. There are about 10 of us in the gang. We loved bikes, climbing trees, making bogies that they call go-karts now, swimming and explosions. The Arthur family moved away to the house at 350 Manchester Road, Clifton. He was always referred to as just 350. It was 4 miles uphill all the way on my push bike and would take 20 minutes to get there, but only 8 to get back as it was all downhill and I could keep up with the cars I was going that fast. I must have travelled there hundreds of times. 350 was an open house full of teenagers meeting, talking, drinking, having parties, just having great fun. Glyn's dad was a teenager in spirit and would always be part of it. He became a mentor to many of us. When he was 15, Glyn's mum left, so Glyn and his dad changed their name from Arthur to MacArthur to stop all the confusion that the surname Arthur had caused. At this time I started to go dancing, but Glyn would have none of it. But it was there I met my future wife, Muriel. She became a special friend to Glyn and Ivor, just as I was. Glyn fancied Muriel as well, and he did not know that I knew that when we had a short break he tried to convince Muriel to go out with him. I couldn't blame him for trying, but luckily for him, she declined. Glyn was very much a ladies' man. He had many girlfriends. Some you would take home to your mother, others you would not. Fortunately, he reformed later when he met Jean and became a one-woman guy, which was much to his credit. He always had the eye for a pretty woman and was vocal about it. Jean was very tolerant of his comments and would just laugh at them. She knew she had him under control. Glyn was in touch with some of his nicer girlfriends on Facebook and Skype, teasing them with his memories. Glyn studied catering at Bolton and Hollins colleges. Then his new career of being a chef started, with a romance, or should I say horror, of a turret room while working in the Norbeck Hydro Hotel in Blackpool. This was followed by the Ellesmere in Swinton and the Dolphin Restaurant in Eccles. But his favourite workplaces, though, were Warden Goldstone's canteen, which was full of characters, and the posh Kendal Mills, where many of his future chef friends and even his future wife, Jean, worked. After the time at Kendal's, Glyn and his dad pooled their funds and opened Mac's Cafe. This was near the docks in Old Salford. It went from being an excuse for a cafe to probably the best and busiest in the city. Glyn and his dad totally refurbished the living accommodation. as it left a lot to be desired when they moved in. It later became his home with Jean when they married 45 years ago in 1970. The cafe closed because the whole area has been demolished to build new homes, which have now also been demolished. After a second cafe in the MIF terminal, he decided to work closer to home, which was now a pretty cottage in Rossendale. Being chef at the Brown Cow, Packhorse and Bunter's Bistro gave him the opportunity to show his flair for running a kitchen and providing the quality food that people wanted. Glyn was passionate about the way a kitchen should be run and insisted on doing it his way. He had no time for the TV chefs who abused their staff. He always tried to teach and nurture them by being kind but firm. His friends list on Facebook is full of his past pupils who loved and respected him. Working as a chef for so many years with unsocial hours that conflicted with Jean's office hours meant that they could not do the things they wanted to do together. Glyn decided to leave chefing and started to work at TNT, loading and unloading vans full of apparel for all the major stores. He worked nights so he could earn more cash and, more importantly, spend some time with his dad, who was so precious to him. They would travel around sampling cafes, keeping notes as to the qualities or not of each, visiting friends and generally having fun together. It was a huge blow to him when his dad passed away, and I don't think he ever got over it. I wrote Dad's, that's what we all called him, Dad. I wrote Dad's eulogy, but could not speak when it came to the time, so the vicar had to read it for me. That's the reason I pre-recorded this one, as I wanted to ensure that I spoke for Glyn in person. Whilst at TNT, Glyn injured his back and had to stop working as the pain was constant and at times unbearable. He still tried to do things and found visiting the gym at Haslingden helped and again increased his social circle. How did he remember all these people? He convinced me to go with him to yoga classes, which was very relaxing to the point where we would both fall asleep on the floor. I said he did not dance. This was true as a teenager, but when Jean and Glyn joined a dancing school, there were two outcomes. Firstly, again, they made lots of new friends and also won many medals for their skill and grace. Grace is not a word often associated with Glyn, but on the dance floor he would glide, turn and dip like a professional. Jean was pretty good as well. Food played a significant part in Glyn's life. He enjoyed preparing it and he enjoyed eating it. I think his size gave that away perhaps. At least until Jean and Glyn became Slimmers of the Year in the early 90s. There's a wonderful picture of the thin pair in their lounge room. I even have a picture of Glyn and I in my lounge room, where I'm actually heavier than he was. When we were young, he liked it when he was given the nickname Bubbles by his mates. Not just because he was chubby, but because of his personality. Once we were all settled into married lives and had a little spare cash, Muriel, my wife, Glyn, Jean and Glyn's dad Ivor would go out to dinner each week and try the many country pubs and restaurants that had started opening in the area. No credit cards in those days. I remember we were in an expensive restaurant near Bolton, and after a great meal and a dance, I found I'd left my wallet at home. His face was a picture, but Jean came to the rescue and we didn't have to wash up. Glyn and Jean, like Muriel and me, liked to get dressed up and go to a posh do. We both belonged to clubs of very different kinds. Glyn was an active member of the Société Culinaire Française. More of that later. Jean is a master baker, careful as you say that, and I was a member of the Friary Owners Club. These clubs hosted many special events throughout the years. As a foursome, we would attend many of them in lovely venues with great settings all around the UK. Glyn scrubbed up pretty well. Société Culinaire Française is a club for chefs, and as part of the drive to produce excellence and numbers for this important skill, Glyn used to organise an annual competition to find the Commis Chef of the Year. He spent many hours encouraging catering colleges to enter their best students, and then he organised the event, prizes and help with the judging. So win was a major step in the career of a young chef, and Glyn followed their careers with interest. The society dinners were an eye-opener, as a chef would invite all the other chefs and me to their restaurant and show what they could do. From Italian to Indian cuisine, it was a wonderful experience, and thanks to my mate Glyn, I started getting very round around the middle. My passion is Ferrari cars, and where his love of cuisine rubbed off on me, mine for cars rubbed off on him. Glyn often accompanied me when I went to compete at events all over the country. We enjoyed the competition, fresh air, banter, new friends and the socialising with good food in the evening in the hotel. He loved our trips to the Isle of Man and Jersey in particular. Glyn was the most social person I have ever known. Within a minute of talking to him, he would know your life story, and he would also know someone you knew. This miraculous skill I used to always put down to bluff, but it wasn't so. On many occasions we would be away somewhere in a pub, and he would say, "I know that guy over there." I'd say, "No you don't." Up he would get and go over to him. Sure enough, he did know him. How could anyone go in a pub 200 miles from home and always know someone? Glyn could. He could even remember their names, where he knew them from. It was a skill I really envied. Our best times together in the UK, without our wives, were our legendary trips to the Le Mans 24-hour race each June. We went with a group of car enthusiasts from all over the UK, who were all self-made men who only let their hair down once a year, and this was it. The stories are loud, rude and endless, but he enjoyed telling them at every opportunity. With the most exotic car collection you've ever seen, Bentleys, Porsches, Mercedes, BMWs and Ferraris, we would have 20 plus cars in convoy. You should have seen Glyn's face at 185 miles per hour in a Ferrari F40 on a French country road with his foot searching for the brake. Priceless. For all the Aussies, 185 miles an hour is 300 kilometres an hour. It was a week-long odyssey, so that we'd have plenty of clear roads and lots of eating and drinking, especially drinking time. We got into trouble the first year as we arrived home 2 days after we said we would, but we weren't counting. We all stayed in the Formula One hotel at Le Mans. It's very basic, not even a toilet or a shower in the room, but only cost £20 a night. It had one major advantage, a very secure car park, because we had 2 million in cars to protect. Like all the others, Glyn and I shared a room, which meant us sharing a double bed again. No, we weren't gay, but careful with money. Trying to crawl over Glyn to get to the loo was no easy task, and you had to sit up in bed to see if it was daylight yet. These are wonderful memories that will stay with me until I meet him again. Glyn was very interested in gardening and wildlife. He won many awards for his efforts in local agricultural shows and took great pride in correcting the mistakes professional gardeners had made in my garden. He transformed the overgrown vegetable garden, the size of a large tennis court, into a productive area with fresh veg and fruit for all of us. He had a keen eye for wildlife spotting, roe deer, woodpeckers, blue jays, hawks and doves, all in the garden. He would work through the back pain because he loved the garden so much. Sometimes it would be so bad that he would just sit there on his own with a mug of tea, just looking and feeling peaceful. Then into the house for one of Muriel's home-cooked lunches. Glyn had a passion for Salford in the 60s and 70s, especially the pubs where he would drink a little and play the fruit machines whilst talking to anyone who would listen. I was not a drinker, but twice he convinced me to go with him on a pub crawl. The outcome was the same each time. I would pass out in some embarrassing place and he would be casually talking to the barman. These stories are for later. I suppose I must mention here that Glyn was careful with money, an honorary Scot or Yorkshireman. He boasted he could peel an orange in his pocket. This was an image he liked to project, but there was no one more generous with his time and feelings. He always liked to be first to get around in, and he would come and paint your house if you asked him, and I did. Glyn was not what you would call handy in the DIY sense, but was very good with a sledgehammer and a spade. He would make up for all of this by cooking for you. After he had to stop working, he spent most of his time with his dad. But after we lost Dad, there was a hole to fill, and there suddenly appeared a saviour to any boredom he may have suffered: the internet. I offered to give Glyn a computer and connect it to the internet, but he declined. I took one to his house anyway, and it sat there for 2 years. He was at a loose end one day, switched it on, and was instantly hooked. He now has the biggest social network you could ask for, and he could search out people he knew in the past and more. The rest is history. How are we all going to cope without the collector and distributor of the funnies and rude pictures? His biggest internet buddy was Muriel, my wife, who has agoraphobia brought on by the loss of her voice. They would send each other dozens of emails every day about Salford, recipes and poetry they had both written. Glyn was a wonderful poet. Even though they did not physically speak or meet for 3 years, they loved each other and were soulmates of the first order. She asked me to say these few words, which were their standard greeting. We knew each other so well. Never say goodbye, say ciao. Glyn often talked of coming to Australia to retire when Jean finished work. His family were all out here, and Jean had a younger brother Gavin and his family in Australia. The bad weather in the UK and old age do not go together, so it made good sense. I remembered what Glyn had said, and it made sense, so we came to Australia to test the water. With the help of Bryn and Yvonne, in our last week we bought the house we live in now. Glyn and Jean followed a year or so later after selling their cottage, and before long they settled into their new house, which I know they have been very happy in. Bryn's wife Yvonne died, and he found it hard to cope. To make sure he was okay and not to intrude on his privacy, I arranged with him to go to lunch once a week, giving me the chance to keep an eye on him. This was the forerunner of what became Boys' Lunch. Mark Magnuson was the third member, and when Glyn arrived he became the fourth, and then Tony Ratcher joined us, our weekly event. Glyn has always been the mainstay of Boys' Lunch, with his endless supply of old jokes and stories, ensuring there was never a quiet moment. Sadly we lost Bryn and Tony to ill health. Their places were taken by Peter Bidgood and Michael Arnestone. The group was stable for a long time, and we really enjoyed each other's company. Mark left us to go north with his family, and unfortunately we lost Peter a few weeks ago to cancer. Now we have lost Glyn. With strength of character and a positive attitude, he defeated prostate and bowel cancer, then aggressive chemotherapy, but eventually he succumbed to motor neuron disease and pneumonia. We're down to 2, so we need to recruit 2 or more like-minded souls to replace our good mates. There are some very close friends of Glyn and Jean in the UK who cannot be here owing to distance and time frames. Mary Bond, Anne Bryan and Sarah Polinsky, Jenny and Brian Hobson, Mike Henn and Caroline, Stuart and Leslie Dyson, my daughter Dawn, my sister-in-law Pat, Stephen and Sheila Wielden, Jim, Glyn's walking companion, Ron and Ada, and Jean's brother Bryn and his partner Monica. On behalf of Jean, myself and the family, I would like to thank everyone who is here today, and to those who sent their good wishes and tributes on Facebook and email. I will reply to all of them with a copy of this eulogy and other tributes, uploading them to Facebook and to YouTube. Glyn was a brilliant, caring, generous, spirited, larger-than-life man. He was cheeky and joked to the end. On our last outing, he even tweaked my nipple and laughed as I leaned across to fasten his seatbelt. That was my special friend. Please join me in saying goodbye to the best friend a person could have ever wished for. Good night, God bless our Glyn. Till we meet again.